Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hello everyone, I'm Professor Lila Simon from the Department of Management of the Bhopal School of Social Sciences. And it's indeed a great pleasure looking at the Gujarat University UGC Human Resource Development Center doing a great job since last few years. I take this opportunity to thank the director of UGC HRDC Center of Gujarat University for being taking at such an exclusive step so that teaching and learning process can be regenerated and can be refreshed with all the challenges of the new normal that we have been seeing the last few years. Well, to begin with today, I have chosen the area of student assessment and evaluation. We all know it's a tough time when we evaluate the students or we assess the students. Most of the time, these are the areas wherein we don't think much how to proceed with. We do a lot of learning, but what has to be done and how a student needs to be assessed is of very great importance. हम बहुत बार बच्चों को कुछ क्वेश्चंस देके उनका आंसर्स लेके हम खुद सेटिस्फाई हो जाते हैं, but then are we actually doing justice to what is happening? We need to take care. So today I'll be discussing on what is basically this assessment, what is the difference between assessment and evaluation, how we as a faculty should look upon for designing the assessment and making some statistical measures using certain tools of evaluations. So let's have a look. The slide says the difference between assessment and evaluation. Let's look at the meaning of these terminology. When we say assessment, it's a process of documenting. We document the things, but then it needs to be measured up. What are we measuring? We are measuring the knowledge, we are measuring the skill, we are measuring the attitudes, we are measuring the beliefs. So that's what is known as the assessment part. However, what is evaluation? Evaluation is, it's a systematic process of, we keep collecting evidences about the student's progress. We want to know, oh, who is the topper of the class, or what has the students done in the previous year and how has performed with this year. So you look at the change that has been happening. So it's a process of collecting the evidence about the students' progress and what have they achieved, both in the cognitive and non-cognitive areas. Something very important is we need to keep up the Bloom's taxonomy levels. I think higher education institutions should now look on to framing the questions depending on, actually that was how it had to be done. But many of us are not doing it for various reasons. Maybe because our system doesn't follow looking at the kind of the different kinds of students that we are getting. We are not able to develop that kind of a product as what we have in our minds, or we have our own challenges for the for different reasons. So you have to find the cognitive areas and the non-cognitive areas of learning, and on the basis of which a certain kind of a judgment. I just will be emphasizing on the word judgment, because evaluation is somewhere related to the term judgment. Okay, so and then we make our decisions with the evaluations. So we have to find, when you look at the nature of assessment, There are two words that I have used. Assessment is connected to diagnostic, and evaluation is if connected to judgment. So, what are these two terminologies? That's different. When I say assessment, I said it's diagnostic in nature. Why is it diagnostic? When I go to a doctor and I say I have a headache or I have a stomach ache. So what does the doctor do? He diagnoses the things, he asks me, oh, since when did you have this? What did you have it? What did you have from your normal routine? So there are certain things that comes out as a query wherein the doctor asks. So as a teacher, there are certain things we need to diagnostic on. So an assessment is purely a diagnostic where we understand what is the skill in the child, what is the knowledge in the child, or what is he different in, from the normal routines of the formative, or I would emphasize on more of a summative kind of, an end exam where we are just coming to a conclusion that the student has passed or failed or made it to a 60% or made it to a 70% or made it to an 80% and so on. So we have the kind of the evaluations, based on evaluations is judgment. Why do we say judgment? Because as soon as we told, oh, he is a top scorer, how do we get to know he's a top scorer? We'll be judgmental on that part. We say he has scored the highest in the class through the so-called the format, the test pattern that we have had, right? So when I'm talking about assessment, it's more of a diagnostic in nature. When I'm talking about evaluation, we be judgmental to whatever the report that we are getting. And basically, evaluation is what we are normally doing. Very few of us are very few of our institutes are focusing more on the assessment part. So it is assessment and coming to more of the evaluations. So we have to understand the difference between these two. As I've already said, we are taking into account the assessments of the skills and knowledge and attitudes and belief, and evaluation as a systematic process where we are collecting the evidence. So that's the reason why we are calling it as more of a kind of, judgment in nature. So that's something very important that we need to keep in mind. Now, what do we say? Assessment is classroom research. We are making a research on the different criteria in which we are kind to. So when we are, that's the reason I think the higher education pattern has come up with, internal assessments. The term that we use is internal assessment. What is this internal assessment? It could be whatever be the kind of the tool that you're using to assess, and we just don't, like, we in our institute have a very beautiful system of assessing the students. We conduct some kind of presentation skills. We give them some kind of a case studies, and what we do is we take the best one or two, whatever the requirement is. So how are we helping the students? Every student may not be the best presentation. Every student may not be the best in the communication skill. So why is it a child should suffer if he is good in some, another one kind of a skill and not that good in another kind of a skill? So this is something which we need to take care of. So assessment is basically a classroom research to provide useful feedback. We can tell the child, hey, this is a very good identifier. We identify the students, you're very good in painting, you're very good in communication, you're very good as an orator. You are very good in your maybe content writing. So this is how we assess. This is how we realize and we understand what is the good in that student. So assessment should be always not a kind of lot of tension to both the evaluator and the one who's been evaluated, but it should be a kind of exchange of ideas where a teacher would understand what is the understanding of the student in a particular, and this is possible only when a student will start responding back. It will do a lot of improvement in the teaching learning process. So when we look at evaluation process, we said we use the word judgmental. So evaluation uses the methods and basically to measure. How do we measure? Now, what is very important is to measure the student learning, and we're coming on talking about the outcomes also. That's very important because higher education is more now focusing on what can be done for engaging the student into the learning process. So we define it as more of a learner-centered process. Our teaching learning process needs to be more of a learner-centric rather than the teacher-centric approach, right? And understanding the material of for the purposes of grading and reporting. It's not that we get into a class, we teach, we give them the presentations, we give them a lot of notes. They just read the notes, they write exactly what has been in the notes given to them with no change in, not even the capital letters and the and the small letters that has been used in the teacher's note. I mean, this is not the real kind of evaluation that actually has to happen. But looking at the system, many systems cannot be changed, but to some extent, we can have our own creative ways. You know, um, the things that are in our hand, at least there we can put up our creative and innovativeness. It's basically, when I talk about assessment, it's basically, I use the word feedback. Now, feedback. Why is the feedback? Because that is where the child would tell, this is not a play, this is not the thing that I'm good at. I would be a very good event manager. Can you give me an event? I can be a very good content developer. Can you give me some content to write? So when I assess a child, when I'm in a dialogue with a child, when I'm doing a diagnostic kind of a interaction, I come to know the goods and the kind of the expertise a child has with. So accordingly, we can benefit. It's basically mutual benefiting. Otherwise, what will happen? Talking about evaluation, it's more of like, instructor is telling, beta, tumne 60% marks score kiye, or you have failed in the examination. So it's something that has been evaluated from the point of view of the evaluation. So the instructor basically. So when I talk about the assessment is basically, it's kind of a feedback also from the student. So you come to know about what has he understood, how much has a learning helped him, how much has he understood, or what has he understood. I have delivered something, and very important to know what is his understanding on that delivery that has happened. Right? That's very important. The next one, as I said, evaluation is just an instructor is evaluating and he is just giving, this is what the result is. This is what your result score is. So we need to think about it in a deeper sense. Need to be very serious about these things as well. So when I talk about what is assessment in education, beautifully explained. In education, it is a process of gathering, interpreting, recording, and using information about pupils' responses to an education task. Very clearly, what we do is the task that has been given to students. How has he performed? So it doesn't needs to be something which is very specific. Everybody is not having the same caliber. Each person is unique. The talent you find in pupil A will not be the same talent you find in pupil B. So how are we going to, adjust this kind of? What is his understanding? How can we come to a level where the students of different levels can be brought up. You can't just say कि इसको तो समझ में नहीं आता है, ये तो पढ़ाने लायक नहीं है. No, we have to bring up that child in the way that he understands it. So what can be done? So that is basically needs to be taken care, and a lot of care has to be. So beautifully explained. It's a kind of gathering the information, gathering, interpreting what has been, what the child has got, or recording the facts and the figures of how the student has grown and understood. What was that I wanted to explain to the child, and what is that the child has taken. So that's something which is very, very important, right? So again, beautifully said, when I say assessment, we have this word assess. It comes from a Latin word assidere. It says assidere. What does it mean? It means to sit with, you know. So that's the reason when I'm assessing a child, I have to spend time with him. But when I'm evaluating, I don't sit with him, right? That's, very technical difference. When I say assessment, so it's something which is to sit with. So in assessment, one is expected to sit with the learner and is an ongoing interactive process. Can't just give it to them. I give them a case study and I keep on discussing with to come out with the answers. So that is kind of the assessment. That is the real in-depth meaning of what is assessment, right? So basically, there are two parties. One is the assessor and the other one is the assessor, right? So that's very common and we know about it. The assessor is basically someone who assesses the performance based on certain defined standard. We say, oh, if you get a score above 6, you are so and so, you're good, you're like excelling. Or maybe your grade in this is above this, you are excellent. So that's something. So while assessee is someone who is being assessed. So, there are two terminologies here also. We have first, very important thing is we need to sit with. So the assessor needs to be with the assessee, and there's a continuous kind of a dialogue happening to understand what is the performance happening. What is the performance that has been observed in the past with the efforts taken, what is the change that has happened. So something we do, very important, something we do with and for the students and not to students. So assessment is something that we do, so it's with and for the students, and we don't do it to the students. So that is something that has to be understood and beautifully explained in one of the research papers taken from 1999. Now, when we say evaluation, this is again, we've been using these terms very loosely, assessments and evaluation. So evaluation is basically a process wherein we are determining the merit. We said, oh, you are the topper of the class. You are not the topper, you failed in that class. So basically, what are we doing? We're determining the merit. We're determining the word, or we're talking about the significance, of whatever an evaluation is a product of that particular, whatever the process has taken. So what is the outcome of that product in that particular process? That is what we do in evaluation. So basically, as I said in the evaluation, I said it's a judgmental process, right? Many a time, somehow, when we do evaluation, we come to a judgment. Oh, this class is a duffer class. We've evaluated it, right? So we are making some judgments, with the kind of evaluation. So it helps to judge the extent of progress a student has achieved the desired set of how much the child has been able to attain the goals that has been set. So that is something which is very important. Now, if we look on to what is the need for a classroom assessment, that is very, very. So when I say what is the need for a classroom assessment, why do we do this? If you're saying, oh, it's diagnostic in nature, so why should we spend so much of time? Why should we try different modules and based we are rushing and finishing up our syllabus. We actually don't have time, and where when it's just evaluation document and then finish. If you look at back to the schooling, the new education policy now I think is a very good example, and it's now taking care of all these things. I still remember when there was a change in the pattern of evaluation that happened in the 10th standard and 9th standard years back, wherein we had the formative and the summative that came into kind of. But what is very important is, why was it summative? Why was it formative? The kind of the data sheet that we had, kind of documentations that the teachers of the 9th and the 10th had to do. The child is good in communication, the child is good in community service. So there were a lot many parameters. So it is like that a child, when you have just one point to evaluate, you just tell the child that it's good or bad, ye acha hai, bura hai, topper hai, failure hai. That's the only way you assess it. But what happens when you have a sequence of, it's always a motivation for the child. The child also feels very, very happy that somewhere he's been graded and acknowledged. So there is a lot of need for we as teachers to take special care and to address the kind of the varied students that are coming to our classroom. So classroom assessment helps teachers to obtain useful feedback on what, how much, and how well their students are. So that's something which is, can be taken care of. When we are talking about, this kind of the classroom assessment where we actually diagnosing the child to understand his efficiencies, or maybe what is a skill that he is good at. So classroom assessment will definitely help the teachers to obtain, because it's actually a feedback. So the child says, oh no, this is something which you can understand the fear in the child when the work is being given, kind of a problem solving. So a child who is a very easy go child will not want to get into those kind of problem solving. So these are very, very situational things. When as it comes, you try to understand, and accordingly, I think when you evaluate the child and the child gets what he deserves, that brings about a lot of motivation. So need for a classroom assessment is basically to understand and to identify what my products are good at, kind of. So when I talk about importance of assessment, why we've been talking about why classroom assessment, so we all can say what could be the importance of assessment to find out what the student knows, to find out what student can do, and to find how well students can do, how well students can do. So that's something. Now, how well the students can do, as I said, every student cannot perform well in one area. Could be their skill vary from one person to the other, the performance and the regular performance. There could be a lot of difference between that. And also something which is very important is when we have a feedback, when we get a feedback, we come to know what the students feel about it. What the students feel about it. That is something which is again very, very important. So what could be the purpose? As I've already said, when I'm talking about assessments in classroom, what could be the purpose of assessment? Purpose of assessment, as I said, motivating and directing them. The whole concept of this assessment is to make the student motivated to learn what the teacher is delivering in the class and to understand, for how he can present himself in the society. Basically, so the entire learning process, we can, just a simple sense, if I want to teach addition in the class, what is very important, it's not that a student, a small child comes with a 2 pen and 3 pen, adding 2 and 3, maybe using his pencils, maybe using his fingers, or his mental calculation to find what is the sum of 2 and 3. For me, what is important is that the student should learn how to add. The concept needs to be very clear. And this is what, I think even now a lot of accreditations are also focusing on what is the kind of outcomes, So when we are designing certain programs, we have the program outcomes, right? When we have a special degree course, a degree program, right? Special degree program, like say, for example, a bachelor degree, you call it as a program, right? So that particular program will also have some kind of an outcome. कि भाई इसने डिग्री करा है तो expectation should be इसको ये सब आना चाहिए, that is kind of thing. When it comes to maybe in a graduate program, we need to be more specific. When I'm talking about, oh, उसमें BCom किया. The moment I talk about BCom, so the program has now become very specific. So now it's a program specific outcome. So when I talk about a commerce child, my ideas about what a child should know after he completes his BCom is different from what my expectation is from a student who has completed maybe BA in history. They're two different, right? But however, both of them are undergraduate programs. So that is there should be a common outcome that might have to come out when a student completes his degree. There should be a specific outcome when he is either doing his BCom, or he is doing his BBA, or he is doing his BA in arts or whatever, right? So become specific. Now, every course that he has studied, maybe in BCom he has studied financial management, or maybe he has taken up tax practices. So, so the course outcome is again very important. How do we actually know कि भाई इसने ये course किया है तो the child should learn or should know अपना tax calculation करना आना चाहिए, kind of. या फाइनेंशियल मैनेजमेंट में तो बेसिक सर्टन एनालिसिस है, ये उसको करना आना चाहिए, कंपनी की बजट कैसे बनती है वो पता होना चाहिए. So when I'm talking about a specific course like taxation, there is an outcome of that. So we have to actually evaluate the child, assess the child on the basis of what should be our course outcome. We have to connect it. हम बहुत बार we look at the higher education system, we are not actually doing all things. We are just setting a set of papers. Children are passing with 90%, 99%, whatever the score is. The teacher is happy, the student is happy, the stakeholders are happy. But we need to ponder, is this the right kind of the outcome? Are we actually coming out with, is a child, whatever is the child, learning? And that's one thing I think. What you look at the education system, a BCom, after completing a BCom, a child goes into any other kind of stream later on. A child who takes BBA gets shift to any others. You know why? Because many a times the understanding of that particular outcomes of the various courses is not being very elaborate, not very much known by both the learner and you know, the facilitator, you call it as. But the teacher doesn't know. The teacher has been given a specific syllabus. The teacher goes by the syllabus, and teacher is in all hurry to complete the syllabus. And with that, we are not able to connect what are the outcomes. Are we actually achieving the outcomes? How are we achieving the outcomes? Are we actually assessing the outcomes? So that is something, very, very technical. And the basic purpose of the assessments should be this. This becomes a motivation, and then I said, and becomes a direction to the learning process. As I already said, the feedback of the student performance. Your students, the feedback to the teacher on what the student did not understand, helps a lot. So it is a feedback to the student on their performance. It's also a feedback on the instruction, or basically it could be also a feedback on the kind of the curriculum that is happening. So that is the reason, when you look at the accreditation process, you will find that whatever be the accrediting body, be it is NAC or NBA, you find that there's always questions that are related to how are you attaining the outcome of your course? How are you attaining the outcomes of your specific programs? So, how much is your curriculum very apt to what is the industry academia relation? uh, we take the feedbacks from the alumni, we take the feedback from people who have been alumni and now working in reputed companies, to understand what they have learned, what is that they are missing out when they have joined the industry. So this is something very, very, very carefully taken care as well. We also have to ensure the standards of progression. We're looking at what is the level of the child. Is the child happy just clearing a 90% marks, or is the product coming out to serve the industry with what is their industrial needs? So that's something which is very, very important to know, right? Very commonly, we have heard these three types of assessments, and this is, the kind of diagnostic, the formative, and the summative. We have got the three types, which very commonly, we are using these terminology. Now, we say diagnostic as it actually tells us what the student needs to learn. It tells us what the student needs to learn. Formative, it tells us how well the student is doing his work. What is his performance, the work progress. And when you talk about the summative, it tells us how well the student did at the end of the unit or the task, right? So, something very, whenever I take up this formative and summative assessments, I normally say formating it is basically the formation of the tree. When we are planting a small tree, हमें उसको बहुत care करना, पानी time to time दो, we nurture it to see that the plant grows. So what is summative? Summative is the tree has grown to a full plant, started bearing, right? तो वो तभी possible है जब formative बहुत अच्छा हो. So something which is very important is the types of the. With this, I would be ending with the first session, and I will continue with the remaining session on what are the different methods that we can choose on assessments, and what are the kinds of the online tools, to give you an idea about the techniques that can be used. So moving on to the slides that we've been discussing, we've been discussing about what is assessment and what is the difference between assessment and evaluation. We talked about the types of assessments as diagnostic, formative, and summative. Diagnostic, as we're talking about, it's something which we are actually trying to understand the student's needs to. Why should a student learn? What should basically a student learn? What is his learning needs? That's formative, as I said, it's like a small plant. We actually start nurturing the plant. And when it start growing, we add manure, whatever we need to give it to the plants for it to grow. So formative is that kind of an assessment. And the final is the summative. It tells us how well the student did the task at the end of the unit or maybe the semester, or whatever it is. Right? We move on to the next slide, wherein we will, as I said, we'll talk about the techniques that can be used for formative evaluations. Right? So basically, when we're talking about evaluations, what kind of evaluations are required. The techniques for formative goals as interview methods are there. We can have kind of assignment methods. We can have surveys. We can have focus groups. We identify two people and then coming to a group discussion kind of a thing. We can have pre-test and post-test. Briefing the students on a particular matter. So we take a pre-test and after briefing, we go for a post-test. Then we can have peer evaluation. That's something very good. Children do it very beautifully. So this kind of, knowledge sharing, peer evaluation should be taken care of. We can also have observations. We have reflective writing is something which is very, these are some of the areas that you can choose according to what is the nature of the classroom that you are having, what is the kind of the students that you are, what is the kind of the course that you are teaching, and discussion. And talking about minute papers, then you can have formal discussion, some kind of a pilot study, and of course something which is very very common in the mid-semester course evaluations. That's something very commonly used. We just evaluate the child on the basis of the end examinations. Techniques that can be used for summative evaluations. This is something which is we normally do it, for formative and summative as well. But post-test, surveys, interviews, peer evaluation, standardized at some kind of standardized tools which have been used as the tests, and of course the end of the semester post evaluations is fine. As I was discussing in my first part, I said student learning outcome. Very important. What has the student learned after he is graduating? What has the student learned after he has done his specific program? What has the student learned after completing the course that he has gone through? That is something which is very important, and these days we are giving a lot of importance to know the student learning outcomes. What are they? It describes the specific behaviors that a student of your program should demonstrate after completing the program. What are the behavior that a student should be able to, perform or, behave or demonstrate after he completes his program? So we actually, basically the focus areas are, the abilities. What are the intended abilities? The knowledge that he has gained. What is the values that he has learned? What is the attitudes of the student, after completion of the program? So this major takeaway should be this terminology. After, basically when I have a class, as soon as I finish a lecture of mine, I should be able to connect with the students that after today's lecture, what have they learned, you know? So, and that outcome should actually be measurable also. It should be actually measurable, right? So the key questions that one should keep in mind is what is expected from a graduate of a program. This is what I was just sharing this now. I said, what is expected from a graduate of the program? What level of service is expected of the office when a student goes to an industry to work? What is the industry expecting that the child should learn and come and should be able to handle this in my firm? What is expected as a student progresses through the program? So these are the basic key term, three key questions that should be answered when a course has been taught. What does the student know? Talking about the knowledge, I've been using these words, cognitive. So the Bloom's taxonomy again comes into, how are we connecting the Bloom's taxonomy terminologies, the different levels, uh, how are we incorporating that to assess the child or to evaluate the child? That is very important. That will give you a measurable outcome. That will definitely give a measurable outcome. So you can measure the outcomes of whatever the courses that you are taking up. So what does the student know? Is basically cognitive, the knowledge that he gains, the cognitive, the thinking capacity, whatever it is, understanding. So you have the cognitive level, and what can the student do is more of psychomotor. So after you have taught him this particular course, what all are the things he is expected to do and what he can do. That needs to be taken care of. What does the student care about? That's again very important. It's becoming the affective part of it. So the three terminologies are very important. You can always connect it with the Bloom's taxonomy and make use of. There are a lot of keywords in each of them. I'm not going to discuss it. You can just uh, try to find out what is the Bloom taxonomy, and then you can just find out these terminologies and what are the key words. There are a lot of key words: define, create, many are there. So accordingly, your question should be framed in that way, wherein the student is able to answer it, right? When I'm talking about the categories of assessment methods, as I'm learning when a student is learning. So what are the different categories of assessment methods that I can do? Could be something which is you are assessing the student on the learning part of it, how much the student has learned. You can have direct assessments and you can also have indirect assessments to understand what the students have learned. So what is direct assessment? Direct assessment is you evaluate the competencies of students basically on the basis of the exam scores or could be the portfolios. Right? So these are the direct assessments. The indirect assessments would be evaluate the perceived learning, student perception. What is the understanding? And what is the employer perception? When he is going to their company to work, there, as I said, there is an expectation of the company with respect to what the product they should get. Uh, so are they trained for that? Or there exists this industry academia gap? How wide is that gap? That's very important to understand. So when I'm talking about the categories, we can also have, assessments on the program. As I said, maybe a program gets over, a course gets over, or maybe a unit or a module in a course get. You can also have direct assessment and indirect assessment in that aspect, right? Another one is very important, that is the curriculum mapping. Something is a method to check alignment of curriculum with outcome. We have the curriculum, we design the curriculums, but how much are we thinking that जो हमारा curriculum designed है, are we mapping it with the kind of the outcome that we are getting? So that's how do we go. I've just taken some good few examples just to show you, in my coming slides and explaining a little bit how you can go ahead with making certain kind of the assessments and trying to find out that all that the effort that you are putting in, uh, are you getting the outcome for all those? So there are certain online tools on which you can take the assessments. Like Socrative is a very beautiful technical term, but very, very simple, like the kind of the quizzes, the questions that you ask them to give the answers in the real time, and you grade them, kind of. Uh, Google Form is basically very easy. You can see small Google Forms wherein they can answer the multiple choice, maybe some long answers. All these they can do and they can submit. That's very easy, and can be the automatic. There can be certain rubrics also that can be inserted into it. So all that you'll get an Excel sheet which has been wherein you get the marks, everything that's written in a sheet. So you don't have to put in a lot of extra effort to convert or keep a documentation of what you have done. Mentimeter is a very, you know, kind of very much it was into during the pandemic. Kahoot and Mentimeter was very common. Quizzes was very common because children love to be a part of this because we can know when they're all online classes. It was always, am I audible? Yes or no, and we never knew what the students were doing at the other end. So Kahoot was one good thing. Just Mentimeter and Kahoot was like they come to know their names and displays so that they get their answers when they type. So that was little connecting and engaging. So these kind of tools can always be taken care while we are assisting. Poll Everywhere is again a tool that is being taken by teachers for asking questions. So these are some of the interactive tools that can be taken care. While we are talking about the assessment tools, something which I have talked is the curriculum mapping and the rubrics. Now, why do I say rubrics? Rubrics just because when we are designing something, you know, we should have, like say for example, when a child is solving a maths paper, it's not that a child did not get the answer, the final answer of the question. We just don't simply give them zero. What do we do? We just give them certain steps, marks for this. Similarly, certain rubrics can be created that if the student has done up to this part, he will be getting this mark, this much mark. If he has gone a step ahead, he will be getting this. So some kind of rubrics can be created that will actually help and engage the student, for his assessment. So basically, the rubrics is used for assessing qualitative student work, such as maybe the essays, projects, reports, or presentations. Basically used for grading and providing feedback to the students and for informing and encouraging students to think about their own learning. Rubrics also provides a range of performance by establishing categories that span the range of possible outcomes from basic to exceptional performance. So when I have a certain rubric that has been made, I can understand, oh, this child is extraordinary good. He has reached up to this step, he has cleared all these 5 to 6 steps of his assessments and he's reached this. So some kind of a rubric can be created which will be interesting for the students. We also have curriculum mapping that I was talking about. Now, why do we actually do? We need to know what we have taught, you know, where are we and what are we teaching? Is it that connected to what is required for that product to be a good one? to be utilized by the ca- the place where he wants to go. No? Is he being prepared with the skills that is being required? So that is very important. A curriculum map identifies where in curriculum learning outcomes are addressed, what is taught, where and how is it taught, right? Or conversely, it says like the mapping process may help you to determine whether your curriculum and learning outcomes are aligned. What is your curriculum? And what was the outcome of the learning that has happened? Are they in line or do they have a lot of gaps? It will actually reveal the mapping needs to be taken care of. So when building the curriculum map, what do we discover? We discover a lot of things that there could be the learning outcomes are not being fully addressed. You know, what was required is not there in the curriculum. So we need, what are we to do? We need to redesign the curriculum. Now, do we actually look at this before we redesign the curriculum? I don't think we do it. We just do the curriculum. We are not coming out after doing this course, what is the outcome of that particular course or what is the outcome of that program? So are we designing the curriculum according to that? So this is a mutual one. No? Are we addressing all the issues that is required? So when, where, and how to collect the assessment data? Varied assignments or activities can be used to assess your outputs. You know, you just have to do different things. Like say for example, we take up marketing research. So is the student able to do a simple research on a market survey? You know, that's an outcome. How do we actually measure it? So these are the small things that would help the student in a great way to come out, and we as facilitators will be satisfied that we're justifying with the kind of the outcome that we need to get from the curriculum that we have designed, or maybe according to the changes that we do time and again in the curriculum. Where you can make changes for improvement after you have collected and analyzed the assessment. So there many times you find there's a gap existing or this part of the curriculum is not required at all, not at all matching with what is the outcomes, you remove that. Or this is something which was not much required and then that has to be added also. Such kind of things that needs to be taken care of. So this is one just simple example of program curriculum map with performance targets that we have developed. We have learning outcomes. We have lot many learning outcomes. So we just mark them on a point on a scale of we can fix up a certain criteria of marking them as 1, 2, and 3. Like here it is said emerging, developing, and proficient. You know, how are we grading it? Such kind of this we normally do with the kind of the assessment we have already done. Now on to the left of the side is basically the required is these are the required subjects. What maybe elective 4 and all that, capstone like this project or something like that, and then different course numbers are given. So we are just marking. You will find that in the learning outcome for this first one is 1, which means it's just simply an emerging kind of, right? And then suppose we find this all gap, which means that the learning outcome to whatever we have designed has nothing to do with whatever is the course that we are, right? So a kind of mapping. Now this I think every organization can design it, and you can use a performance goal, kind of scale that can be used to, you can take a common understanding for your own, because this cannot be applicable to all the kind of courses, but depending on what is the kind of the course you are teaching, you can take on those particular scales, mark it as 1, 2, 3, and then to find out, are you able to achieve your outcome? Basically that is what is required, right? So this could help. As I said, the scales are there. We have developmental scales. Like as I said, here it is emerging, developing, and proficient. So that's just one example that we have taken. It's there in the last part. Here we have emerging, development, developing, and growth. This is basically a developmental scales, which indicate how far a student is expected to have advanced by the end of the course towards a standard of competence or a program learning outcome. outcome. So whatever we are mapping it, right? So basic the curriculum mapping that we are doing. So it could be beginning, intermediate, it is an advanced, it could be introducing, practicing, mastering over a subject of kind of a person. So it's just the introduction or kind of practicing or could be mastering or maybe emerging, developing and proficient. So we can just good below average, something like that. You know, you can scale and then you can have it for your own courses. We also have intensity scale, which indicates just two examples that I've shown you, which I've taken from one of the articles that are there. The references are given at the back. Intensity scale, which indicates the degree of teaching learning that occurs. So, is it just introduced? It's just been practiced, or it's been demonstrated. So you come to know about this, right? Looking at the score of the mapping that has been done. Or is it introduced, reinforced, or emphasized? Or maybe lightly covered, moderately covered, or maybe it is heavily covered. So all these scales, you can also develop your own scale according to the pattern of the system you have, pattern of the kind of the students you have, the pattern of the teaching and learning that happens in your campus. So this can be, uh, different. Now, when I talk about the key principles for effective assessment, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. Create a learner-centric assessment. That's something which is very important. Until and unless it is learner-centric, the learners will not come and, they will not be engaging themselves in this kind of assessment. So, what you want to gain out of this, you will not succeed in that. So, create learner-centered assessment that includes self-reflection, include marking rubrics, as I've already said, for assessments of contributions to discussions as well as for assignments, projects, and collaborations. Collaborative work is also very good. One university to the other, maybe one classroom to the other. That will all depend on how much you can, do or be innovative for the kind of the assessments that you are giving. Include collaborative assessments through public posting of papers, articles writing, sharing of articles, sharing of thoughts. There's so many things. You can even include people from outside getting into and collating for some work. That will also be a very, kind of very effective assignment assessment that can happen. Encouraging the students to develop skills in providing feedback. Feedback is something, it should be very genuine. They have a problem, they should learn that they have to bring this matter to the faculty or the teacher who is. It's not that if I say this that I'm not able to understand. If I give a good feedback, that is what I say is a good feedback. That good feedback to my teacher, the faculty would, sue me, will not give me marks in my assessments and all that. So that the fear of the child, where the child doesn't want to even bother who is teaching. I just had a marks de do, teacher ko full de do, and then you are, kind of just simply doing a feedback for the sake of feedback. That's just not ethical. It's not ethical. These feedback should happen in the right sense, nor it's like, neither the teacher should feel bad about what the feedback is given by the child, और you feel it नहीं हम तो बहुत अच्छे से पढ़ाते हैं but उसकी problem है वो नहीं आता है ना. As I said, the classroom is varied. The number of products are varied. So we have to go about, in a different aspect, and we need to take in to understand what are our lacking, so that each time we can have a better performance. So, encouraging the students to develop skills in providing feedback is something which is very important, because feedback in all areas has become very, very mandate, and is being taken care of. Like, uh, we've been hearing that in the coming days, in this course and the assessments of the teachers, also the feedback of peer, the feedback of students, the feedback of the heads are going to have an impact on what are the kind of the promotions that you're going to get and all that. So let's open it with a with a warm, kind of positive note that each feedback could be critical, could be for our good, so that we improve upon. Design the assessments that are very clear, easy to understand, and likely to work in the online and the offline. Whatever be the kind of, make it more creative. Let them go online. Let them come and do some work. So you need to keep it up in a very open manner. And so that is how you have to design, and that would be the beauty of making a creative, effective, assessment. Now we just have just have a few things here on display which talks about things that you need to keep in mind while you are doing making creating an assessment of what to use. Like say for example, it's in a presentation. Who is going to by whom? Presentation by whom? By the student. What is the context? When and where? What is the kind of point of service he's doing on a kind of, suppose he is going to an industry, he's going to make a presentation. I've learned all this, and then you are able to tap that acha, he has learned all this, he has understood this. So what is the outcome here? The outcome is he has learned, you know he has learned what is his requirement of the service that is being required. So I've just put certain certain parameters here. This is again taken from the references that I have mentioned at the back. But then, of course, always make some changes and try to have this kind of. At the end of the day, what is very important is that we need to get the outcome. So when we do the curriculum mapping, we need to understand that there is some outcomes which is justifying to what has been said in the curriculum. So there is the mapping is intense, and there is some positive response to what we have been doing. So like say for example, test, any test. So who is going to take the test? The instructor is going to take. When is he going to take the test? At the end of the year. What is he trying to? What is the purpose of that? To understand what is the skills that you have. Now, portfolio. You're talking about certain kind of a portfolio, giving it to a customer, and if it is throughout, and then you're going to check out how was the time. So these are small things that we can actually do, and it will help you out in attaining our assessment. I think you got an idea about how different is, we've been taking it so lightly for us assessment and evaluations with just the papers, the question papers, the time we spent for standing the 3 hours of our invigilation duty, where we actually don't like to be a part of it, and then the correction part of it, which is becoming very tedious. So it is not all about just those things, but much more in depth. And what is more important is the assessment. You're assessing the student in a right way. I think evaluation will have its own, uh, way alignment with the kind of the result that you get, right? Okay, so curriculum or course based, just I just took, there's one kind of assessment that you can do is a curriculum or a course based. What is basically how much the student is performance on the base of the curriculum. You can give him some projects, you can give him some case studies, you give him some classroom assessments or some course embedded assignments. Every course will have its own embedded assignments. So some course embedded exam questions or kind of portfolios, or maybe some reflective thoughts that he can write. So these are the things that you can go ahead with the kind of the uh, performance based assessments, taking care of how much the curriculum learning has happened. There are certain tips on selecting. Now, when we are selecting all these methods, and there are certain things that you need to also keep in mind. You need to match the assessment method with the learning out. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपने कुछ भी एक assessment का, there's no case study at all in a particular, but then you're just giving into a kind of a case study of learning or something. So you have to match what's the kind of assessment that you are making, and is it matching it with the learning outcomes or not. The assessment results should be usable, and whatever the results that you get, that is actually measurable. That should give you an outcome which will tell you that भाई ये curriculum का outcome है, ये course का outcome है. It is mapping also. So if it is of no use, it will all go as a waste. Because see, at the end of the day, what is required is you have to document everything. So if you document the right thing, that will be the benefit of you and also the institution for which you are working. Results should be easily interpreted and unambiguous. You know, that the results ऐसा नहीं है कि ऐसा भी हो सकता है, इसका result ऐसा भी हो सकता है. No, it should be a data is there. You say 40 and above है, the child is excellent means excellent. There shouldn't be any unambiguous, kind of thought coming in why 40 above है तो excellent है या not. You have to be very clear at it. So all these work has to be taken care prior to you set up. Of course, once you make up a proper assessment, that can be used every year, adding more to it. So that a one-time effort is very much required. Identify multiple methods for assessing each outcome, like direct and indirect methods. I said qualitative, quantitative methods you can have. Maybe some passive or active methods within the different courses. Also, you can have interdisciplinary kind of things within different courses and conducted by different groups, even by different groups. By the seniors and the juniors. What do they think? What do these people think? You get some ideas better in juniors than the ideas that the seniors people. So such kind of interactive sessions can also this is also a way in which where you can assess students, right? Identify sub-components where other methods may be used that follow deeper analysis. Then it is use methods that can assess both strength and weakness of your program or unit. That's again what I have already mentioned. Projects are ideal for students learning outcome assessment. Projects are very good. Give them projects where they do a lot of collaborative and give them the teamwork and then efforts that they take to learn and then to accreditation criteria. Then we also have the program reviews. How do we review the program is again very, very. So when we talk about characteristics of the classroom assessment, what is very important is it needs to be learner-centric. We have to keep in mind that in whatever be the classroom assessment, it has to be learner-centric. If you're not able to engage the learner into that particular assessment, the learner will simply not give that assessment. And it's just going to be a waste of time. So you have to find that whatever you are giving, the student should should get engaged into. And of course, if things are not that easy, as I've already said, there are a lot of challenges and pitfalls. And getting into all such things, you get a lot of talks, a lot of hurdles, a lot of people not being helping you out or maybe not very encouraging. But then what I just have something to say is one size does not fit all. Some methods work well for one but not for the others. So that is the key takeaway that you need to understand. But whatever could be the attempt, what we do, maybe a method A may not suit few students, method B would be the best for them. So somewhere the other student will benefit out of it and will be always motivated. And that's all from this. And I'm sure you got a background about what we have done in this module for this refresher course. I once again take the opportunity to thank the director of UGC Human Resource Development for taking such initiative, and Gujarat University, the number one of its kind here, has a very good place in the at the Indian university level as well, and I could at least express a few of my learnings, and I'm sure this will definitely benefit the takers, and you all would try to come out with some innovative way of creating assessment wherein we would also get into and engage ourselves to a beautiful learning and teaching process. Thank you all once again for your patience.